What's up, everybody? I'm here with Hamm. He is a breathing specialist, and he does a lot of work around how utilizing the breath can help in mountain pursuits. Andre was an Olympic hopeful in slopestyle. He had an injury, concussion, kind of put him out of it. And then he found breath to kind of bring him back, get him back in the mountains, and kind of return to normal. It was a big part of your recovery.
Yeah.
And I think that's super interesting. He's put together some really cool breath courses. And I just kind of wanted to talk to him a little bit about what he does, how he works with people, and how we can use breath as 100-year athletes to kind of keep us moving and grooving. So start off, just run us briefly, how'd you get injured, and then kind of take us through the recovery to how you found breath.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me.
For sure, dude.
Excited to be here. So I grew up skiing, fell in love with slopestyle skiing, just kind of being in the air, learning new tricks. That's really where I found kind of that growth and that joy. Summer 2017, Mount Hood, right? Mm-hmm. Early in the morning, I'm out there training. I was working as a counselor for Windell's.
What's that?
It's a kind of summer camp for skiers and snowboarders up on Mama Hood.
Sweet.
And it's like first run of the day. I was like, whatever, won't put the helmet on. And then Tom Walsh was like right behind me, so I was like, I gotta do something cool.
Gotta rip.
Yeah, and I did something super simple, and then just came off this rail just a little bit, kind of sideways, and just got caught up in some slush. Just kind of hit my head, and I didn't get knocked out or anything, but I just had these kind of consistent symptoms of a headache, of just feeling like things weren't right. And, I can talk about that for a really long time, but
I've heard it.
Basically I just had this headache and just this kind of brain fog. And I saw a ton of concussion specialists and put a ton of work into that. And it really kind of started this cascade of not having great mental health that lasted a few years. Found an awesome therapist, and kind of took care of that side. And that's kind of when I started playing with breath work. And for me, it started as just a way to stay sane, pretty much. Mm-hmm. I needed 20 minutes a day of just doing some breath work, getting some perspective on my life, getting a way to feel good. And what that allowed me to do is I had a lot of anxieties around returning to sports, returning to skiing, because anytime I would go off a cliff and, kind of fall, nothing, no big deal at all, I would just have these anxieties about, my long-term health and my brain health. So the breath work really helped me kind of just see those thoughts, but really get back to the sport. And honestly, I think one of the reasons that my mental health got so bad is because I stopped playing outside, stopped getting in the mountains. So having that ability to then go outside, get back into skiing, back into mountain biking, skateboarding, climbing, all these activities that kind of really brought my life a lot of joy was super awesome. And I started off practicing the Wim Hof method, which we can talk a little bit more about that later. Yeah. But that just really opened up a whole world of breath work to me. Mm-hmm. And what I got super excited about was just how breathing is just such an easy way to kind of get some reading on your internal state, and then you can choose how to react. And so that works on a mental aspect, but also on a physical aspect as well. It's a super easy way to monitor kind of how much energy you have left in the tank. You can also just increase the amount of energy that you have, recover quickly in between sets, and really calm yourself pretty quickly before you do a big trick or something like that. Yeah. And it's just given me a ton more understanding of my body in the mountain environment and an athletic environment. And that's kind of why I'm really excited to start teaching more focused athletes who want to get out there and use the breath as a tool.
Hell yeah. And I know for a fact he was pretty grim for at least a year, for some time. Not a whole lot going on there, trying to figure everything out. There was some fear around getting back to the activities that injured you. And I can also attest, this winter I watched him stomp a 35, 40 footer with style, fast, and it was dope. So it's really helped him overcome kind of where he was, and I thought that was pretty sick. So one thing you said was 20 minutes a day of breath work helped you be sane. And I think that's relevant to a lot of people. A lot of us mountain athletes enjoy the mountains because it keeps us sane. And so if we were having struggles that prevent us from getting in the mountains, like I see that as a huge problem for me. So dive into that a little bit more. How does the breath work? How did that help kind of get you back to a state where you were like, I can get back in the mountains now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think to your point, that's a huge issue, not necessarily a problem, but a lot of mountain athletes are kind of that type A. We love adrenaline. We love pushing ourselves. And when that's taken away from us, people tend to get either, have super bad mental health problems or just not great. Or they, may start to experiment with drugs or, make bad choices.
Yeah.
Where the breath plays in with that is especially more active breathing methods like the Wim Hof method or something like holotropic breath work, sort of really activate a lot of endorphins within your body. Mm-hmm. And especially with the Wim Hof method, you release huge amounts of adrenaline. So you get sort of this euphoric or endorphin fed state
like
where you feel
high.
good. Yeah, you're getting higher in your own supply,
Yeah.
And it, especially if you're just used to that, kind of high intensity activity, skiing, mountain biking, whatever, where you do get those natural endorphins and that adrenaline, then bringing that on naturally through breath work allows your body to then get into a relaxed state, into that parasympathetic rest and digest, where, if you haven't done necessarily your activity before that, it can be hard to achieve.
Yeah. So the breathing was a way for you to get happy drugs on your own supply. Mm-hmm. And then that allowed you to get your mind back where you're like, I can get back out there. I can handle these fears that I have in the mountains.
It was really just something that had all to do with agency. I had so much just kind of fear and anxiety and, depression going on, and just having any sense of control over the way I was feeling, that's what the breath gave me.
Interesting.
And so knowing I'm like, okay, if I fall, if I go skiing, I have health insurance, I have a therapist, I can get through it. It just kind of, I was able to sort of make more rational decisions around like my state and be like, yeah, I can handle hard things. So let's go back out there. Let's go hit some cliffs, do some jumps, do some cork sevens.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the application of that's huge for anybody in the mountains, because as a climber, there's plenty of times where I get a little in over my head and it gets scary. And I do. Like one of my things, even before I knew what breathwork was I would just try to take deep breaths and count to 10 before I made a decision. Mm-hmm. Am I reacting to an emotion or am I reacting to a reality of like, this is bad, you need to get out of here? Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, it's just an emotion of like, whew, we're up here, or like this setting's real. So using the breath to create agency over how you feel, the application in the mountain environment is the countless. So many applications of that.
100%. Yeah. Especially, taking slow, deep breaths, like you said. Mm-hmm. There's a ton of research showing that just like breathing through your nose and having the slow, rhythmic breath, really engaging that diaphragm, increases, I don't know if it's decision making, but I know you learn faster. And I remember one study specifically looking at how just a slower breathing rate decreased cravings in alcoholics, which I guess can be
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a short term. But, if you're really reacting to something, to me, that's a similar mental kind of habit. So it'll make you, I think, give you just a better reaction.
Yeah. Instead of reacting to emotion, you can use the breath to
respond
like instead of react. That's cool. So we've talked about how we can use breath for performance. I talk to my athletes about that. Let's start off with what is a practical application that somebody could try.
Yeah.
When, like, say they're above something that's scary, whether that's they're above a piece of gear, they're above a cliff, they're about to drop into a new line in the park, they're about to hit a new line on a mountain bike, and like the fear's up there, the excitement's up there. It's kind of the same. Like, what do you do with your breath?
Yeah, so it's actually a little bit more complicated question than, one might think initially. For a lot of the time, we have that heightened sense of kind of fear or anxiety for a reason, maybe because we're about to hit a 100-foot jump and do something really big.
Yeah.
Or, you got to like have a lot of strength in your fingers to not fall, when you're climbing. So we want to keep that in mind, that sometimes we want to be aware of that and not necessarily try to diminish it, but be in control of that fear. So if we're in a place where we can really calm down and continue to be effective in our sport, something that I really like is called the physiological sigh. And this was kind of made famous by Dr. Andrew Huberman. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Once or twice.
And how that works is you take a double inhale through the nose and a really long, slow exhale through the mouth. So you want to do that?
Yeah.
Kind of like this. Inhale. One more. And then long, slow exhale through the mouth.
So really exaggerate the exhale.
Yeah.
In, bump it up, really long, slow exhale.
Yep.
So I'm about to blast off on pitch 6 and it's the crux. How many times do you do that?
I just kind of do it once.
Yeah, just get you
once,
focused.
And then follow that with maybe if you want to spend more time kind of in a meditative focused state, just continue that or follow that up with just some kind of slower belly breaths, really focusing on breathing into the diaphragm.
Mm-hmm. Just a couple deep breaths, get focused. And that's a valid point that you said, that fear, that excitement, it's kind of the same emotion, so perspective that's different.
Yeah.
If you don't have that and you're about to do something gnarly, you're a psychopath.
Yeah.
And you should kind of reevaluate.
Yeah.
One thing that time in the mountains has taught me is that 99 out of 100 people have a similar feeling of anxiety or excitement before a big day or before a big line or before a big hit. Mm-hmm. And it's our ability to utilize that sensation, that emotion for energy to focus so that we execute well.
Yeah. And
if you can't get your breathing under control, we've all seen this with different athletes, it's game over. Like if you've had somebody in a mountain, let's talk snow skiing, like when you're skinning or something and it's a very technical piece and they lose their breath. It's instant like, oh no.
And it's super social. It affects you too. You hear that and you kind of feel it within yourself.
Yeah, so the breath is really important in learning to control that. So would you call that the exaggerated
physiological sigh?
Physiological sigh.
Yeah.
So, and then a really long, slow exhale.
Yeah.
That's super good. That's useful. Another place that I use breath work all the time in the gym is when you're training. So while you're doing something hard and in between efforts of doing something hard. Mm-hmm. What does that look like in the kind of stuff you teach?
Yeah, so my kind of mentor and the person who I did the training with was Dr. Belisa Vranich, and she is kind of an expert in all things fitness and breath. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what she focuses on with strength and endurance training is first, you have to have an efficient breath. And she developed this functional measurement, which she calls a breathing IQ. Mm-hmm. And that basically looks at how the expansion in your rib cage on a breath and where you're breathing. Mm-hmm. So you need to be able to breathe diaphragmatically, which means you're going to see movement in your abdomen and in your ribs. But a lot of us live in this sort of chest breathing, neck breathing area, which sends a signal to our body that we're in constant stress. So first thing we do is we learn to use the diaphragm to breathe where we have movement in our abdomen, mm-hmm. and we have expansion in our rib cage. And then once we have that, that allows us to be really effective with our brace, which is what we're going to see that's going to be really helpful to keep our spine protected when we're lifting.
Yep.
And then we're also going to be able to breathe better when we're under load. So imagine, you're lifting. Got a big.
This is our lifting posture.
Yeah, this is our lifting posture. You got a big bell on you, and then there's a lot of weight. And if we're traditionally taught, or if the only way we know how to breathe is up and down, mm-hmm. you're gonna have a really hard time getting a breath in, kind of, because you're gonna have to move that weight every time you take a breath.
Yep.
If you're able to keep your core tight and then expand side to side using your kind of those rib muscles, you're going to be able to get a lot more breath in and out, which is going to increase your energy while keeping your spine protected.
Yeah.
Especially when, you're lifting.
Yeah.
And then for the endurance aspect of it, Alison McConnell, she's I think a researcher out of the UK, has just done a ton of research on inspiratory muscle training.
Yeah.
And what she showed is that you can get so much benefit from training your breathing muscles in terms of how fast you can run and how long you can run.
Yep.
And one of the main reasons that is because of something called the metaboreflex, which is it's a fun word. I use that when I'm at parties and I want to sound really smart.
Tell me more.
So this reflex is your body, it needs oxygen, So it's going to prioritize that over other bodily functions. So if you're out on a jog, you're using your legs, you get to a point where your breathing muscles are fatigued, but your legs are still working. Your body's going to divert blood flow and resources from your legs to your diaphragm, to your breathing muscles, so that it can keep getting that air in and out and fueling your cells. Yep. But what that's going to do is take power away from your legs. Mm-hmm. And so that's what's called blood stealing. And a lot of times when people kind of get winded really quickly, that could be the reason.
Because it's really weak breathers.
Yep. So you increase the strength of your breathing muscles. They're going to become a lot more efficient. Yep. You're going to be able to go a lot longer before you hit that reflex that's taking resources from your peripheries, your arms, your legs, and moving that into your core.
So if you had the same athlete, we've cloned them, exactly the same. Yep. They're on the same running program. One's on a breathing program, one's not. What's your level of confidence the breathing program runner's faster?
100%.
100%. Yeah. All right, I like it. So what does that look like? How do you train the respiratory muscles, the diaphragm, your secondary breathers? Yeah. All of what's the program? What's that look like?
So a lot of the research that has been done has been using these kind of resistance training devices where you kind of inhale through a small hole with like a device you have in your mouth.
Like the Instagram ads I get all the time.
Yeah.
That I ignore. All right, tell me more.
And what I really like about what Dr. Belisa has done is she's, laid out a ton of exercises that you can do with straws, with balloons, or in just your mouth to train your exhale muscles and train those inspiratory muscles. So that's going to look like, something that people may have seen in a yoga class is maybe a breath of fire, which is kind of like you kind of breathe in and out pretty quickly, really just focusing on like, kind of bring your belly button to your spine with each exhale. So kind of a modified version of that, which, Dr. Belisa calls exhale pulsations, which is really focused on just having good mechanics with it, so you train the right muscles. That's going to be, a key exercise to getting your expiratory muscles going. Also using straws on an inhale, kind of attaching them one to the end to make the end really far away. That's going to create resistance to an inhale. So you can use just, at home, things that you got laying around. I don't know if you got straws laying around, but you might have to go buy them.
I might get some, but McDonald's next time I go.
Yeah, save the straws.
Yeah. Is there a device that you are familiar with that you like?
I use the O2 trainer, which is developed by Dr. Belisa and this guy, Bas Rutten.
Oh, Bas Rutten?
Yeah.
The
MMA fighter?
He's a legend.
Yeah, he's a beast.
Yeah. So the O2 trainer, that's legit.
Yeah.
I've heard Bas Rutten talking about this. I'm like, dude.
Yeah, I mean.
What's going on?
Yeah, that's his thing.
So it's legit.
Yeah.
You use it yourself.
I use it myself, and what's really cool is you start to feel, so your diaphragm doesn't have nerve endings.
Yep.
Because if you could feel your every breath, that would just be kind of annoying.
Well, it has nerve endings, but not the kind we feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of perception there.
Yeah.
So when you start to exercise it, you start to feel fatigue in the muscles next to it, and you just start to feel a general sense of fatigue, which is why when you're doing kind of endurance sports, you can get kind of this perplexing.
You get like a stitch in your side.
And you get that kind of general fatigue that you can't necessarily pinpoint on anything. A lot of the time, that's the diaphragm.
Okay.
Being weak, but Boss Root and
O2 trainer.
O2
So if we
trainer.
had, so
yeah.
I ordered an O2 trainer. I'm maniacal, so I've got fucking 4 climbing sessions a week, 4 lifting sessions, 2 long cardio sessions, 2 slow cardio,
Yep.
2 short, not slow, fast but short. How many days a week? How much time do I need to dedicate towards this? What does that look like?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I really like inspiratory muscle training, or just respiratory muscle training in general, for increasing your endurance is because it works pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You're going to want to get your breathing to be a lower body horizontal diaphragmatic breath, because if you use one of these devices without having a good breath, you're going to start training, your neck muscles and your shoulder muscles, which is
compounds the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So get your breathing IQ to an A, and then at that point, 3 to 5 minutes warm up, kind of get those muscles moving. And then with the O2 trainer specifically, I think what they advertise is it's kind of like 3 minutes a day.
Oh, so it's quick.
Yeah.
Can I do it in the car?
No, I would not recommend that. with any sort of like deep, conscious, hyperventilatory breathing, you're going to want to do that in a safe location, kind of lying down, seated, because you can get lightheaded, you can pass out. So you always want to do that.
Do it seated.
Oh yeah, or like lying, or like seated. So yeah, seated. Cause
don't do it standing.
Don't
on an edge.
No, don't.
Or a chair.
Yeah.
All right. So O2, you said you need to have your breathing IQ to an A, just to make sure when we are training our breathers, we're training the ones we want to, not the typical office worker. My neck hurts all the time. A lot of times it's because poor breath mechanics. How do we get our breath IQ to an A? How do we even get a gauge on our breath IQ?
Yeah. So if you just kind of Google breathing IQ, it'll take you through. Dr. Blaze has a website, but there's 2 steps to it. The first thing you're going to do is measure your location of movement with your breath. And that's going to be, are you kind of breathing up here using your neck and shoulders? Are you kind of breathing right here using mostly your chest? Or can you consciously do kind of a lower body diaphragmatic breath?
Yeah.
And so that's one aspect of the breathing IQ. And you can kind of have a little bit of both in that regard. And then what also you're going to look at is your range of motion in your rib cage. So what you're going to do is you take a cloth tape measure, kind of place it where your ribs meet your abdomen, directly below the nipple line, and then you measure the circumference right here on an exhale and then on an inhale.
And the delta is what you're interested in.
You're going to take, it's easier on paper. Basically, you take the difference, divide it by the circumference of the exhale, multiply it by 1,000. That's going to give you a percentage. And you're trying to get over 100%. So an easy way to remember it is if, let's say, my exhale circumference is around 33 inches. So I'm trying to get the difference between my exhale and my inhale to be at least 3.3, right?
Yeah. I mean, sure, I believe you.
Yeah.
I can't do math in my head.
It's okay.
This is a huge
so
problem.
if you have, exhale circumference between 30 and 35 inches, you're going to kind of wanting to look at that 3 to 3.5 inch range for difference between your inhale and your exhale circumference.
Got it. So like an average adult male.
Kind of, 3.5 inches, 4 inches.
So.
If you're kind of smaller built, 2.5 to 3 inches.
And that's the delta. That's the difference you're looking for.
That's the difference, yeah.
And so tell us the formula one more time so we can pull it out and write it down.
Totally.
It'll be in the description.
It'll be in the description. So you take the circumference on an exhale and the circumference on an exhale. On an inhale. And that is where the ribs meet the abdomen directly below the nipple line. And then you take the difference between the inhale and the exhale, divide that by the circumference of the exhale. So for me, it'd be 3.4 over 33. 3.4 is the difference, 33 is the circumference on an exhale.
Yep.
And then you're going to multiply that by 1,000.
Got
and
it.
that's going to give you like 1.2, I think. Or something like that.
And it needs to be 1 or greater.
Yeah.
And that's
aiming for 1 or greater.
breath IQ of an A.
Yep. And I haven't met a single person that has above like a C without doing any
training.
Yeah.
Okay. So say you do this and you fail, whatever, it's not an A.
Yeah.
how do I get to an A so I can start training my breathers effectively?
Yeah. So first of all, don't get bummed. That just means you have a lot of, and honestly, in like a 2-week, training 10, 15 minutes a day, you can feel a lot of benefits both in your just general well-being and in your fitness. Mm-hmm. So that's good news. You have a lot of growing room. And what you're going to do is if you go, I think on Dr. Belisa's website, the breathing class, there's a lot of, there's like a PDF you can look at that just has all these exercises. But the main thing you're going to want to work on is increasing the mobility in your rib cage and learning somatically what it feels like to breathe in a lower body breath.
Yep.
So a lot of those are just kind of simple stretches that you can do. The first thing, a pretty simple exercise is a rock and roll, which is kind of like a seated cat-cow, which is a yoga position. Yep. On an inhale, you're going to arch your back, relax your abdomen, and then tilt your tailbone out. Exhale, round your back, slide your tailbone under, bring your belly button to your spine.
Yep.
And that just kind of exaggerates a natural breath movement and is going to, you kind of start to feel, okay, this is what it feels like to relax on an inhale. And this is what it feels like to narrow on an exhale. Mm-hmm. And then also we do exercises where we just kind of stretch our ribs, the intercostals, which are the muscles in between your ribs.
Yep.
That's going to allow your...
Do you do breath work while you're stretching, or are you just holding some static stretches?
Mostly dynamic, kind of like inhale. You want to kind of think about it as stretching from the inside. So on an inhale, and then we feel that stretch on the side.
Yep.
Exhale, narrow.
Bring it down.
Find that still.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I'll provide you with some resources so people can check it out, dive into it.
Hell yeah. Okay, so we know breathing is helpful, especially for endurance athletes. That one's obvious. I'm a rock climber. You're a slopestyle skier.
Yep.
Why do we care?
Yeah, so this is actually, I had some really fun conversations with Dr. Belisa when I was kind of doing the training program around this, because I was like, I know I've felt it. I felt the difference. But I wanted to kind of get her opinion. So obviously, which we've talked about a little bit, is the mental aspect of it.
Yep.
Any of these extreme sports, there's going to be some nerves involved. You're doing some high consequence things. Yeah. Which is why it's fun. That's why we like it. It keeps us coming back. Yeah. On top of that, your diaphragm acts not only as a respiratory muscle, but it's also a big balance muscle.
Okay.
So on an inhale and on an exhale, and depending on where you're breathing, your center of gravity is going to change, just depending on kind of where the mass is in your body. Mm-hmm. And your diaphragm is kind of the conductor of that.
Yep.
One way we can think of that is, if we're lifting something pretty heavy, we keep that core tight. That kind of keeps us a little bit more stable. Yep. When we have a lower center of gravity, we're not going to be able to topple over as easily. And that we use that to our advantage when we're kind of moving. Breathing is the most fundamental movement in your body. And when you learn to master that, you can have better control over other movements.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I just wanted to kind of talk about climbing really quickly. Something that kind of is cool about that is, okay, so you're always in kind of weird positions, right? Always. You're going to be like doing like a knee bar here and there, and your feet are going to be over your head. You're going to be super long. And this is kind of where it has a similarity with MMA, is you never want to be caught in a position where you can't catch a breath. Yeah. And so if you're, super pumped and you're in this weird position, no matter what, you've got to be able to find a way to take that breath. Yep. Keep that lactic acid, moving, which the diaphragm kind of...
It's a piece of it.
Yeah.
Important piece.
It is.
Yeah.
So, training breathing with certain parts of your body kind of like contracted, you're going to learn to find those pockets of breath. Yeah. And that's going to allow you to kind of find that mental stability, but also kind of keep your energy up while you're in those tight spots.
So some of the training I've gone through, I've done a lot of functional anatomy seminars, FRC, functional range conditioning stuff. And Andrea Spina, he came up with that whole thought system, but he has a quote, and it's, you don't own a position until you can breathe in it, or
I love it.
something like that. But for like in the gym setting, if you're doing a deadlift or a really deep squat, so if you drop into the bottom of a squat and you can't breathe diaphragmatically, you do not own that position. So putting 225, 315, or even 95 pounds on your back, and then going to the bottom of a squat to a position that you can't control the musculature, and just praying that everything works well, is a terrible strategy. It's kind of his point, and he's right. So that's where kind of mobility and breath work are very important. One thing we use in the gym is maximal expansive breathing, which is in line with kind of what you're doing. So you start with box breath. So 4 seconds in, hold it for 4, out for 8, hold it empty for 4. So we start there, and then maximally inhale and hold it for as long as possible. And then, so top holds. Then we also do a box breath. So 4-second inhale, hold it for 4, force it out, and then how long can you hold that? And both of those things, for us, teach you how to control the diaphragm to some extent, and it helps with bracing. But it feels like that's more checkers, and you're playing chess, like a little more dialed in, which is cool. So just to wrap things up, we've got like the O2 trainer.
Yep.
Yeah, and then breath IQ.
Breathing IQ, yep.
Working breath work 3 minutes a day, you can find time. And if it has that type of performance and mental benefits, and you're someone who loves the mountains, whether you're running for performance or just running for enjoyment, a lifetime in the mountains, like it's a no-brainer to kind of work that. Anything else that breath has really been shown to help with in kind of that mountain environment, or helping with that longevity aspect of the body?
Yeah. There's mountains, you're going to get high sometimes. You're going to be in places that have, you're back in a big peak. There's going to be some altitude issues. And there's research kind of showing that respiratory muscle training is going to really help you to kind of combat those and be better off.
Does it help with HAPE and HACE?
High altitude pulmonary edema?
Yeah, and then you got HACE is what? Cardiovascular? Cerebral edema, I think. You got pulmonary edema and cerebral. I forget what HACE is. Yeah. But those are the two that get people in high mountain environments in a lot of trouble. Like, you might die.
I can't point to research. There might be some.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. But I think it would, just because of you're going to be better able to manage your acidity in your body and get those kind of fluid dynamics.
That makes a ton of sense. The research that you read, what does it point to help in that high altitude, just like altitude sickness?
Yeah, it's going to help with altitude sickness, and I can't specifically remember the study where they were looking at how respiratory muscle training helped people in high altitude. I think it was more of a performance rather than removing sickness.
Yeah.
But I know that something that's super interesting is Wim Hof took a bunch of people who had
in their underwear.
They were also kind of sick. They had a lot of autoimmune diseases, and he's like, he's a eccentric figure. But using that technique, they broke the record for basically going up Kilimanjaro the quickest, and they used very few acclimation. So they kind of use it as an acclimation tool and to resist altitude sickness. And not all of them made it to the top. There's still some altitude sickness, but the majority of them kind of went up in record time to the top of the mountain.
Yeah, I saw him doing that, and I was like, he's going to kill people. People are going to die. And then they did pretty well, and that's what turned me on to, all right, I believe now. Like, that's an impressive feat.
Yeah.
Well, dude, thank you so much. This is awesome. You've got a class that you're running in Park City soon.
Yep.
Tell us about that. Tell us how people can find you, and Instagram, YouTube,
Yeah, for sure.
whatever.
So yeah, we're doing kind of like a 4-week program at Minerstown off the mountain up in PC. And we're just going to do first week, master your breathing mechanics. Second week.
So that's breath IQ.
Yep.
Basically get that to an A so we can start training.
Exactly. And then learning the exercises that are going to help you get there.
Yep.
Second week, we're going to learn a little bit more about, okay, you have a good breathing IQ. How are we going to train those muscles? Third week, we're going to look at different techniques regarding endurance. And then the last week, we're going to look at, how do I pair my breath with different types of lifts and under different types of loads.
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the week, after the end of the month, you're going to have a very good baseline into just how to use your breath to perform better in all sorts of different movements and different types of endurances.
Love it.
You can find me. I have a website, ReSpiritWellness.com. I think we'll have something up on.
Yeah, it'll be up on the YouTubes, the Instas, the emails, all of that. So we'll be able to find you. And then if somebody wants to get a hold of you and work on their breathing,
yeah,
what's the best way?
ReSpiritWellness.com. You can book a consultation there, kind of do a free 15-minute just to talk to you. You can find me on Instagram at Andre Hamm, or those are kind of two good places, either Instagram at Andre Hamm or www.respiritwellness.com.
Hell yeah. All right, well, thanks for joining, and we'll be seeing you.